Hola, ¿lo ves? Ahí está. Hola, 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 hola. Ay, morena. Ahora tengo abajo. Ay, esa morena. No funciona. Dile que hey, tu cable está dañado, suéltalo. Se le desoldó un beam. Se le dañó el cable virtual. Ey, ahora sí es de verdad hay que buscar el cable inalámbrico. Moisés, Moisés, ahora sí hay que buscar el cable inalámbrico. Hola. Hola. Oye, esto no está transmitiendo, ¿verdad? Hola, buenas. One to check. Y yo. Hola, hola. ¿Se dañó el cable? Hola, 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 hola. ¿Ah? ¿Ya?
Uy, por favor. Okay. Yeah. Open your mouth like you're talking. Just go. Pa? When I used to do theatre, we used to have to go from the bar bicycle, quietly. Bicycle, 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 bicycle. Okay, but why you got that funny face? Bicycle, 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 bicycle. know all of us, we are tired, but I promise that I hope that is also going to be like a fun and engaging discussion. So this is the last one, and it's about innovation and technology transfer. First of all, I want just to introduce myself. My name is Valeria Peláez Cardona. I am work in Women Engaged for a Common Future, WCF, and also part of the Women and Gender Constituency, and also part of the advisory board of the Climate Technology Center and Network, or CTCN, that is part of the technology mechanism. So we have like 2 questions. I'm just going to read the first one very slow because it's long. So how can innovation and technology transfer foster transformational and long-term approaches to adaptation that leave no one behind? Then including through inclusive innovation, local knowledge, integration, and identification of scalable solutions. There is also on the screen if you want to read it and analyze it, since it's complex. Also here we can talk about like examples or lessons learned, best practices that maybe you know or your countries have done in the previous months, years, about like technology transfer, integrating like local knowledge, or local communities, also marginalized groups, needs. Yeah, any thought?
I can try and kick off the discussion again. Thinking about technology transfer, I want to cast our minds back to an example in a few years ago that came in the form of an existential threat facing our collective humanity, where there was an opportunity for some technology transfer and knowledge sharing, and that was the pandemic, when many of the richer countries in the world were able to mobilize their resources to rapidly generate the technology needed to develop vaccines that were going to be life-saving tools to protect their people, but also the people around the world. And one of the I'm Katie from UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, and during that time we were supporting countries and trying to figure out how to apply for a waiver on intellectual property rights at the WTO in order to overcome some of the expensive costs of trying to manufacture the vaccines in their own territories. But that faced significant hurdles and challenges, and things have moved on since then. But I think we can take from this example some really important learnings and apply them to climate change, in the sense that key technologies that serve public common goods should in turn be public common goods, and the opportunities of sharing those and supporting countries to use them in their own determined needs to aid developmental goals, to tackle climate change, is something that can benefit all. Now that applies to both mitigation and adaptation, but I think it is just worth restating that important role of transfer from north to south, and the fact that this has not moved fast enough for developing countries in particular to be able to use these what should be public goods for public ends. I also just want to emphasise that, or mention something with regards to maybe techno fixes for some things which have maybe more basic solutions sometimes. I'm thinking about food security in particular in agriculture systems, and thinking that often communities, and particularly Indigenous communities, often already have the solutions in terms of their traditional practices. And sometimes the solution is not a techno fix that can be applied to other territories, but rather the amplification or adoption of the solutions that are already indigenous to that place and the protection of those things. So I think that's just one other thing to add. kick the conversation off.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone wants to add something. Well, I can add about like what you say, and also like in the other rooms, they were also mentioning intellectual property rights, and also like how to mobilize like the support to protect the intellectual property rights, and also how to do like the same with the indigenous knowledge to protect it, but also like to learn a little bit about other discussions that are happening at the same time in different UNFCCC spaces. And this is, we are going to discuss it further tomorrow, but like there are like different spaces that they are talking about the same things, like how we are going to scale up innovation, how we are going to protect intellectual property rights, but also like indigenous communities' knowledge, and there was like also a lot of mentioning about the linkages between like the technology mechanism, the financial mechanism, or capacity building scenarios or instruments that we have, like the PCCB, like how all of these can be linked specifically to foster like innovation and technology transfer and development. I don't know if anyone, yeah.
Thank you, Sinead from Women and Gender as well. So just quickly on what you're saying about the technology mechanism, and as we're thinking and talking about mechanisms like we did in the last session, we spoke a lot about like needing a mechanism to get these conversations to the point of implementation. And I think something really important is to recognize the work that the technology mechanism is doing right now, and that parties actually need to strengthen the technology mechanism, which right now is underfunded. So when we're talking about technology transfer, how can we talk about that when the mechanism that exists already isn't even funded? And there's a big opportunity in the technology mechanism when it comes to, for gender in particular, with gender policies and measures for gender mainstreaming in technology assistance requests. Another thing to think about is the opportunity of NAPs and NDCs and how we can leverage these to link with technology transfer and systems. We spoke about this in the capacity session a lot, but I guess the issues are linked. Thinking about, on one side, like critical minerals, but they're kind of linked, but this idea again of unequal exchange north and south, and how when assistance is being given to countries, we now have the Secretary General principles for critical minerals, and one of those principles is about local value addition and local value chains, and we often see it again linking to finance when we're seeing financing for the just transition in developing countries. A lot of the time the South is still being thought of as, or it's still being treated as where the raw materials are extracted, but the manufacturing and the skills for those technologies doesn't happen locally, and then those technologies are sold back to global South countries. And so there's also an opportunity in thinking, when we think about renewables, I know this is more mitigation, but thinking about downstream manufacturing of renewables technologies and the jobs that those can bring. When we're thinking about transitioning countries who are now fossil fuel based away from that. And to jump just off your point about the techno fixes in agriculture, and I follow the agriculture negotiations, and it's one area where I really see that there's huge, as I understand it, like presence of techno fixes in those negotiations, or that like a lot of more corporate controlled solutions to adaptation. And we talk about climate smart agriculture all the time, and sustainable intensification and AI presented as solutions, when things like agroecology and solutions that have already existed and practices that are already exist aren't really thought of as innovative when they are innovative. And that like I see that like in agriculture and food systems in particular, there's a real I think effort to impose technologies on communities when they're not necessarily what they need or what would work for them. I think Yeah, those are like my points on that.
Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and thank you, colleagues who preceded me with the valuable insight and inputs. Really highly appreciated. Burkina Faso is taking the floor on behalf of the LDCs to share our views on the technology transfer. LDC is still facing the digital divide and the AI divide. This is when we talk about AI, new tools, how are we going to align ourselves, finding the fundings for that? Innovation and technology transfer is essential to build early warning systems, building resilient food and agriculture systems, as well as energy access, including clean cooking stoves. Access to advanced technology in vulnerable developing countries is more limited than in developed countries, meaning that the transition may occur at a slower pace. Technical capacity limitation in LDCs also hinder the development of implementation of effective climate adaptation projects. Many LDCs lack insufficient skilled professionals to prepare bankable proposal, conduct impact assessment, or meet the complex requirements of climate finance providers. This is a point that needs to be really critically addressed. Although we have the financial mechanism, it is important I come again into the mechanism that we need to talk about and to put in place together to make sure that we can provide those needs that developing countries, especially LDCs, are requiring. Empowering local actors through skills development and knowledge transfer is essential for ensuring long-term, equitable and resilient adaptation solutions. Accurate and timely climate data are critical for effective adaptation. However, many LDCs lack the infrastructure and technical capacity necessary for comprehensive data collection and analysis. Weak data system impede anticipatory action, complicating the development of early warning system and risk-informed decision-making that are vital to saving lives, protecting livelihood, and reducing long-term adaptation costs. One of the colleagues before was talking about access to technology. There is the costs of it, and sometimes we have our bright youth who's coming up with good technologies. The cost of finance is extremely high. There is a problem to scale up. And then we face the fact that the technology is being rebranded and resell back. And we have seen a lot during COVID, it has happened. We have seen that, and looking to the Yongo constituency, this is about global youth. They have, during COVID-19, they have done a tremendous inventions that they don't have the payback on it, or nor having the data, their intellectual property who are protected. Adaptation are further limited by inadequate cost or outdated technology, particularly when technology transfer does not align with local needs or knowledge systems. If we really want the real transition, when projects or technology are transferred to developed countries under the name of technical assistance and accounted in the countries, partner countries as this, it should be under the cutting edge technology if we really want to save lives. LDC have sometimes been subject to technology dumping, receiving obsolete or ineffective technology that do not support sustainable outcomes. Therefore, it is essential to scale up capacity building, technology transfer, and knowledge sharing while preventing the recycling of outdated technology to LDCs. Effective technology transfer must also context-specific and accompanied by robust capacity building programs that enable local institutions and communities to adapt, manage, and sustain technology over time. We come back again into having a roster of local experts that are trained and that we can maintain in the different value of government, all of government approach. For LDC, climate adaptation and agriculture, for example, require not only the building of hard infrastructure to support agriculture, production, and trade, but also ecological infrastructure to protect the biodiversity systems. Scale-up investment and climate adaptation aligned infrastructure can therefore play a unique and additive role to affect the transition to a lower emission and more resilient global economy. We must also address LDC's special technology needs by developing favorable licensing agreement that ease intellectual property restriction, reducing cost and enabling access to essential tools. Intellectual property rights remain a significant barrier to accessing vital climate technology for emission reduction and adaptation. Green technology transfer to developing countries thus has to be deliberate process of removing IPR barriers and sharing knowledge based on the principle of CDBRC, UNCTAD 2023b. In addition, developing countries need enabling conditions to produce indigenous green technologies as part of their just transition and economic diversification strategies. Capacity building support must also be provided to help LDCs countries effectively utilize the Climate Technology Center and Network known as CTCN. Closing the climate data gap should be recognized not merely as a technical challenge, but as a fundamental pillar of the just transition. One that strengthens local agency and incorporates local knowledge into adaptation planning. Localizing it is critical for us. Relocating, adding value locally, it is important, as the high-level panel on critical minerals that His Excellency Guterres has put in place. Just transition, it's a matter of finding the ways how to cope with the climate threat while greening up our supply chain, increasing our middle class. When we talk about decent jobs, you can't have it without increasing the wage of the people who are in that value chain. Chair, I will stop there and we will be sending our inputs in written for your reference. And once again, thank you for giving us the floor and the opportunity to share our inputs with esteemed colleagues in the room. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you, Burkina Faso, for that so comprehensive and complete intervention. I don't know if anyone wants to, yeah.
Hello, Carol Simon from Panama. I would like to align my intervention more or less like to think about what is innovation and technology transfer. It should be understood beyond digital tools or artificial intelligence. Truly transformational adaptation must also recognize ancestral knowledge, community practices, and local innovations as legitimate and effective technologies, particularly when addressing the specific needs of vulnerable populations. I would like to share like a powerful example from Panama, but in the perspective of the private sector. For example, the experience of Bliss Recycling. This is from a colleague in waste management. This is a local SME that, in collaboration with the Technological University of Panama, invested in research on plastic recycling and composting. And one of their work led to the development of eco bricks made from plastic waste collected during beach cleanups. I want to stop here and explain a little bit. The plastics that you have from the beach cleanups is not usable. It's very hard to insert that in the recycling process. So having this opportunity, because the plastic degrades a lot because of the salt and the sun and all the environmental things. So if using this example that we can made from plastic waste these eco bricks, now it can be used in the single-story construction projects. This showcases how private sector, a topic that we've been talking about during the day, innovation, when paired with academic research, can generate concrete, scalable adaptation solutions grounded in local realities and environmental needs. To ensure such efforts flourish, capacity building and funding mechanism must expand the definition of innovation to include both cutting-edge technology and traditional place-based knowledge. Supporting partnerships between academia, SMEs, indigenous people, and local communities is a key to identifying and escalating solutions that are inclusive, context-appropriate, and climate resilient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to colleagues for the rich interventions. I have a very simple intervention, and I think that it brings the things we've been discussing today and this particular thing together. So whilst we've said very useful things, everybody's intervention, I believe, is useful. And I'm sitting here and I'm asking, how do we ensure that everything can fit together nicely without people working in silos, somebody looking at technology transfer, alone somebody looking at how I let the finance bit work and how I let the capacity building work. And I think there's somebody mentioned in the previous table about mechanism. I think really, if we are going to be honest with ourselves, the best approach to look at this whole just transition is to put in place a mechanism that helps us to work not in silos, but brings everything together. Because these are whole systemic changes that, I just know like a one-stop shop for anything. all these different pieces need to be put together in a place where people can be looking at it, not in a siloed manner, but in an interconnected, collaborative manner. And to do that, we need to put, I don't care what you call it, but there should be something that works such that people are sitting together, cooperating, collaborating, looking at how one part of the world is looking at improving their value chain systems. And what, for example, somebody mentioned critical minerals. And for one section of the world, it's important to improve their value chain system to be able to develop sustainably in this whole transition, looking at some of these critical minerals coming directly from that side of the world, while some other side of the world are going to use it at a point where they create very high value technology, which also needs to be shared. How do we put in place a system such that we all benefit from it and there's nobody being left behind? And for me, I see that at the end of all this talk show that we are doing, we need to put in place a mechanism, a just transition mechanism, something. I hate to hear the word body, but I'm talking about something that helps us collaborate and look at everything in a synergistic manner and see how all this thing work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone has a comment from the last? Yep.
Thank you. Perhaps a summary, because I think I will repeat some things that were said by my colleague from UNCTAD and also by Sinead here. And I think that innovation and technology transfer should be like people-centered and inclusive. And this means that these transformational approaches to adaptation should go beyond hardware or digital solutions. I think that Burkina Faso was saying that, and also be grounded in local knowledge and gender-responsive designs, and also obviously right-based governance. And related to this, innovation should not replicate past inequalities, and for that it should be more intercultural, participatory, and redistributive. And this could mean financing technologies that are not only scalable, like the question is answering, but also accessible and collectively governed and adapted to the realities of the frontline communities. And yeah, then it's regarding the last question, I think that all nature-based or ecosystem-based adaptations measures should not become extractive or privatized, and this has to be with a community stewardship, equity in benefit sharing, and the control over land, the democratic control over land, water, and energy resources, and all resources.
Thank you. Then Philippines, and then we can wrap up.
Thank you, facilitators. So, building up on what my other colleagues have mentioned in this room, innovation when it comes to technology transfer could also mean that we build upon or recognize existing local communication systems, because one of the issues that we've been facing as a developing country also is when a technology is being transferred to a community, there is a dysfunction or disconnect between the language or the practices that that particular community is facing. Thus, we recognize that for it to be inclusive and yet innovative, it should also recognize the existing communication and practices within that particular community to identify and later on become sustainable, acceptable, and scalable solution. When it comes to the second question, how can it be innovative for that particular adaptation measure? We suggest that technology transfer should be in an open access platform wherein everyone could access it and tailor fit it at the same time with the needs of the community. Since when we do adaptation actions or adaptation measures, this is always and should be national determined and fit for purpose for each and every community. And lastly, for in order for technology transfer to be acceptable to the community, we also recommend that micro credentialing be applied to this particular community who will accept the technology in order for them to also gain and in order to pursue the upskilling and right skilling of this particular workers when it comes to the introduction of new nature-based technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there is an announcement, but I will say it at the end. So just to summarize, where we were discussing about different topics. So first, like technologies, especially specifically for adaptation, needs to be considered public common goods, and also then how we are going to ensure that there is like a fair transfer from north to south, but also south to south. Recognize the work that the technology mechanism has done and that we need to fund it. It's not to invent the wheel, but actually to fund and to support and strengthen what is already there in the UNFCCC system. Also the opportunity to link this discussion with just transition, but also with the NDCs and NAPs. Also like the digital divide and artificial intelligence divide that most of the world is facing. So we cannot talk about like technology and innovation transfer without recognizing that there is like a lot of gaps that we need to address. Also like there is like a need or like the need at least to discuss a mechanism to put in place that can articulate all of these discussions about capacity building, finance, and technology around just transition. Then also like it should be understood further than digital tools and artificial intelligence. Technology is not only that, innovation is not only that, and that also means recognize the local knowledge, but also indigenous peoples and communities technologies, and also that we cannot work in silos. So again, the mention about the mechanism, partnership with academia and business is also key here, as the example that Panama mentioned. Then the transfer needs to be people-centered and inclusive, grounded in gender-responsive design, and lastly, like recognize also local communication and also like the local languages to also be, like ensure accountability and transparency. So the announcement. So the government of Panama is pleased to invite all Climate Week participants to an evening reception at the Carnival Salon in Sofitel, starting after this session, together with the participants of the Nature Summit. So thank you very much, and we just need to go to the plenary, and then we're over.
Oh, you like it?